Welcome to Weird Web Radio, an explorer's guide to hidden worlds of the paranormal and occult, reality-expanding experiences, and the downright weird and bizarre. With your host, Lonnie Scott.
And we are recording. Laura Tempest Zakroff, welcome back to Weird Web Radio. It is so great to have you here again.
Yeah, thank you for having me back. We had such a great conversation the last time. It's like, yay!
Yeah, it was centered on ghost cats and then weird, awkward conversations. No, as we do. Yeah. First of all, I understand that you are upset that your name isn't. Is that Zuza?
I'm gonna say it's Zuba Zach. I saw that Marcus's post. I was like, that's such a great name. Why weren't my parents like, ooh, because there is a patriarch back in the Zakroff line where it was like Zachariah Zakroff. Like, something like that. Like the first guy on the lineage, you're like, let's just bring it on home. Z's all the way. Like it doesn't show what his middle name was, but it'd be like funny if it was like something else too. Like, like 3 Z's in a row. Like, why didn't I think this through?
That would be cool. And people don't know who we're talking about. It's Marcus Ironwood over at Llewellyn Publications. Marcus is the force behind a lot of books you get to enjoy. So shout out, Marcus. Thank you for all you do for me too, my friend. Marcus. Yes. Another thing, I haven't announced the new winners of the Weird Webby Awards yet for this year. So you are still the current reigning Weird Webby Person of the Year from 2022.
Yay! I'm holding on to my crown.
Yes, the imaginary crown. I don't send them shit.
You should send out like a little 8.5 by 11 printout sheet where you just tape it together and.
Yeah. Well, each could be a PDF and then a printout instruction for like a tinfoil hat or something.
Yeah, you have like little cryptids and magical symbols all the way around.
Yeah. All right. I'll hire you to make that. You can make the first crown. It's yours. No. Yeah. The Weird Webby Awards being, they're a fun thing. I got inspired to do a few years ago because Devin and Storm and all of them are doing the witchies, and the Jason Mankey had something. Maybe his was the witch. I can't keep track of who calls what. I just know I haven't won one yet. But I digress. I thought it'd be fun to do that too. So I did. And the first time I did it, I just picked people I liked, just randomly. And it was really hard. And I'm like, why? I didn't know how to do it any other way. And I looked into Google Forms and Docs and how to do all that, figured it out. And ever since, including you and everyone, you were all picked by the listeners. So
thank you, listeners.
That I imagine that's a cooler feeling than me going, that was my favorite thing this year.
They're both good points. So, it's nice to know that work is appreciated. And that's where it is at the end of the day, especially with awards like that, whether you have the thought that like, I'm just going to sit down and figure out what were my favorite things for this year, or you put it up to the larger community to decide that, it's the thought that counts.
Mm-hmm. So one thing, this would have happened much sooner had our schedules not conflicted so much, right? As it is in the podcasting world. And you seem to be really busy. So have you found in this, we call it post-COVID, but COVID's still around.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just not everyone living under pandemic rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now that things have really kind of opened up and relaxed again in most places, are you finding that sense of community again?
Yes, especially here at the local level, because we were able to start up an open path group, a kind of study group for Modern Traditional Witchcraft. So that started in 2022. Yes. And it started with, again, we still keep it a very limited amount, and people are need to be vaccinated, or so, because it's a small enough room and people are close enough together, and like every single event that we've done has sold out in advance.
Oh, wow.
People are really hungry for community, which makes me laugh when I see people complaining on the internet, like, the community is not the same and people aren't showing up. I'm like, well, maybe you're just not offering the meal that they want.
Mm-hmm. So you call it an open path thing for modern traditional witchcraft. So it's like an event, a class that people buy tickets to be part of, limited access and so on.
Yeah, we have, and it's a small donation, which pretty much covers rent and what do we say, refreshments, right? Snacks. I say snakes and snacks. And we alternate between doing a ritual, which exposes people to different kinds of ritual, as well as sort of a lecture discussion series. So each month they get one or the other, and then we are doing larger events. Like our big event is Day of Witchery, which is basically a big festival in the park that has vendors and lectures, and that's open and free to everyone. And we invite other community groups, different covens, different organizations to come out and also promote what they do, so that people can see what that's about.
Okay. Modern traditional witchcraft.
Mhm.
I know you had a website for it. You still do. I know my first exposure to the idea that you put forward in that was with your book, Weave the Liminal.
Mm-hmm.
Has modern traditional witchcraft become a thing that you kind of hoped it would be or envisioned? Or is it turned into something else entirely? Like, what's the state of modern traditional witchcraft versus your vision?
I wish we could go back to like 1998 when I was putting that website out there and ask myself, what do you think you want to have happen? Of course, in my early 20s, it would have been probably a very different answer than I want today.
Right.
Because especially the longer the longer this road goes on, thank you, fates.
Right.
The more like I don't want to run a church. I don't want to run a temple. I don't want to be a guru for people. Like I'm more about like being behind the scenes and helping people on their path in a way that helps them be independent, type of thing. So there's that side of it. But on the other hand, I've learned through all of the creative endeavors that I've done, whether in art or dance or witchcraft, is that once you put an idea out into the world, that's it. Like the beast is loose. You are not going to be able to control what people do or say or interpret with that. And so that can be an amazing and wonderful thing because you're like, look what people did with this. And then you can like, look at what people did with this. Why not both?
That's funny. Are there certain practices, I guess, that would define modern traditional witchcraft now as it's solidified into something in that nature?
I feel like it has, especially when I'm seeing other people write books that are kind of based off of my work. And they're tapping into that system of, let's look at the folklore. Let's look at where you come from. Let's look at where you're living now and how do you incorporate modern day aspects of it. So the common characteristics are that looking into the past while being very much aware of the present and the future at the same time. And it tends to have a more ecstatic feel to it, a more fluid, where I call it's the serpentine path, because it's going to change, it's going to roll back onto itself, it's going to shed its skin, and then it can move forward very suddenly. So like, all of that is kind of present within that, versus to say like very certain doctrines or way things are, you have to say it this way. You like, in some traditions, like, a particular coven and a lineage of them, they're like, we always cast the circle in exactly this way with exactly these words and exactly these ingredients. You're not going to quite see that, at least, I don't even know if in our lifetime, but then again, maybe in another 40 years, I'll be like, and this is how we do it.
Yeah.
We call that, I was meeting with some friends in Seattle a few weeks ago for a full moon ritual, and we got to talking about how certain like high priest and high priestesses over time like say, no, we didn't do it that way, we've always done it this way. And instead of calling that gaslighting, we're calling it candle lighting.
Oh. Candle lighting now.
Yeah.
You're going to confuse people.
Yeah. I have to come up with new words for things. That's true. Like, you know, like, no, we didn't. No, like, this is where it was always done. No, that's not how it was always done. You just decided back in like 82 it was going to be done this way.
Yeah. Have you found some various local expressions of this? Because I know on your website you talked about, you called them houses, right?
Mm-hmm.
That were forming. I mean, okay, we'll start there. Is there still like a movement to have people form these collectives?
I still see that. And I think that comes out of the very nature that people do want to still commune with each other. And it's a little bit different than, you know, when you are a new witch and you're like, I have to find other new witches, you know, other witches, and I got to find my people, and you just want to join anything, right? Which, if you're lucky, you find the right group of people, and it's great. But as I think most people in the larger magical world tend to find one group, find out that, oh, this one's too big, this one's too small, and then you find the just right.
Yeah.
That's my next Llewellyn book, you know, the Goldilocks Witchcraft.
The Goldilocks zone of witchcraft.
The Three Bears tradition.
Yeah.
And I think once you find people that you truly are in tune with, that you want to work with, and not calling it a coven, because I say right now we have like our open path sort of group, and that is starting to form into a more organized collective, and the folks who are ready to advance to the next level. But then there's our smaller common collective of the folks who are, what is the word I'm looking for? Well, we have a group of people who we sort of have found each other over the last few years, and they're like, wow, we all have the same thing in common. And it's just so easy to gather informally and be like, hey, it's a full moon, let's go do something. Or it's, you know, this time of year, or we'll just get together and have a family meal. And some magic happens in that too.
What do you do under a full moon? What's your vibe for the full moon? I mean, a lot of people do a lot of different things. I mean, just the other day, right? My 12-year-old daughter is space obsessed, and I love it. I am too. And she's looking at the full moon, and she's getting all excited about it. She's got her phone out, trying to get the best picture of it. It keeps going, Daddy, the moon is full, you know? And I was like, and you know what else happens under the full moon? She's like, what? I said, it just means that around the world right now, there are witches out there doing something, dancing, singing, chanting, something, because that moon is full. And she goes, really? I thought it was great. So what do you do under the full moon? Like, what is a full moon ritual for you? How do you approach this?
So I'm definitely not one of those folks who are like, we have to do something every full moon, or, you know, it's the super wolf, you know, coyote bass moon.
You don't have that list? No.
Like 3 days before a full moon, it shows up on Facebook, this is going to be the mega moon of the century. And I'm like, I am more in tune with the whole of the lunar phases. So in my personal practice, it might be depending on what is needed, I might be more focused on a new moon or the waxing or the wane, you know, so there's that. But in gathering, when we do want to gather together, we're often celebrating or acknowledging something that's happened collectively in our lives, or honoring one particular person in our group. And it can be as simple as gathering in someone's backyard with a little bonfire and some drinks, you know, a little bit of incense, some words, and especially the time spent together. So it's really more about what we can share in that space and honor and celebrate versus a script. So we tend to be like, what is needed today? And sometimes things come out that we weren't even expecting, which I think is the best part of magic, that you should allow yourself to be led down that path and kind of weave things in the moment rather than being like, I'm going to outline this to every single particular detail. And at 9:03, we're lighting the incense.
Yeah, I love that approach personally, but I think that approach for me comes out of all the years of experimenting and experience and having some of those scripts to lean on in the beginning, maybe. For a new person, maybe that's listening right now who gets excited about this idea of modern traditional witchcraft, you're talking about looking at local folklore and history and doing something that makes you feel alive now. And what might they do to get started, though? What's the base level skills you think they need and what they should be able to do to start something like that?
That's a great question. So I think what's important is to look immediately at what's around you. What is the land doing in this moment? Right. So are you at a harvest time? Is there something particular that's blooming? Is there something happening culturally in the area? To kind of give you a touchstone, right? Because I feel like if you're going to do a ritual, it should have some sort of purpose or connection. So that will give you sort of a theme for where you want to go. So, let's say for around Samhain time, right? That's a great time to acknowledge those who have passed in the year and to bring forth the ancestors and start a communing cycle, because it's not just at Samhain that the dead are with us, right? This whole part of the year is still part of the dark year, and I consider it fairly dark until February or March, especially in Rhode Island. And even back in Seattle when I lived there, right? It's still pretty dark. And energetically, you feel that until the earth begins to really wake up. So it can be about acknowledging those ancestors or those beloved dead. It can also be about with the idea of things are starting to hibernate, like what are you pulling into yourself and preparing? So it can be amplifying what you need to get through those dark winter months. So finding out what kind of energy do you want to bring to this? Right. So that doesn't require any specific tools. It doesn't require any specific chants, though you could write something that, if you're inspired to write a poem or a song or do a dance, all of that is fine. I think we get so hung up on, I got to make sure I have the right tools in the right place on the altar, and I have to say these very specific words that somebody made up in the 90s.
We don't mean it, 90s.
I know. When we were doing them, they just seemed so great. But I recently pulled out my grimoire from that time to look up some chants, and I was like, surely there was that one great chant, and I read it. I was like, this is terrible. This is absolutely terrible. But it was a time. It was an era.
It was.
And to kind of, so going what else do you need from that? Well, what do you feel in the moment? So some people, well, I still want to set up an altar. Well, then get yourself a candle, get out some incense, get a little bowl of water. Whatever it is that you want to bring out to that moment or set things up, really ask yourself what feels right. And I don't know, is it going to upset anything? No, just go ahead and play. Cause it's all the different books that we've read over the years, Lonnie, and the experiences we had. But I still think back to, those college groups, over 25 years ago. And, I just kind of was I think this is what we should do, because that's where my brain was at. We're just going to do this thing. And that's how it works. And that's how we found out it does work or it doesn't work. So allowing ourselves to play with that and kind of go, what does our spirit lead us to be? What kind of symbols or signs I'm getting from the world around me that this is what I need to focus on, which is tough. But I think the earlier people get into that, the better they become at ritual.
Oh, I'll agree. Yeah, I think sometimes what structure might do, I guess, sometimes is help people who may not understand that they're in ritual, that it's begun, that here's the part where we honor the thing or do the thing, and then where does it end? Does it end when I don't feel like I'm in trance anymore? Did I ever feel like I was in that state at all? Does it end when I just say thank you? Am I allowed to say thank you? You hear questions like this all the time. And I think the more we dispel confusion, the better.
Mm-hmm. I think it probably also helps if you're a recovering Catholic.
I'm not, never been.
That's just something I like. It's rather hilarious. I know Alyssa was like, you should write that book. I'm like, I was joking. After recovering Catholic, but yeah, it is sitting down and thinking like, what is ritual? Which is why I like to really emphasize to people that ritual can be so simple. And even in its simplicity, be really elegant and really powerful rather than piling on all the stuff.
Gotcha. Now, folklore, I guess, is a part of your practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's something really cool out of the folklore where you live? I mean, last time I kind of asked you this, you talked about a well that was there, where it was one of those, if you drink from this well, you'll always return situations.
Oh, yes.
I don't think that's part of your witchcraft, though.
Is it though?
Is it? Maybe. Here, drink this. Trust me. No. What is something from your area of folklore that you've kind of brought into your witchcraft practice?
Oh, let's see. There's the folklore, and then there's the have I brought into my practice? Because I would say, well, we actually just had Peter Muse of New England Folklore back in November came and gave a talk locally at for Key and Serpent, and talking about the Pukwudgies, the lore of, and that's really kind of a whole fascinating thing too.
And what is one of those things for
well,
people who don't
know? Peter, come right in. It's for the folks who don't know, essentially, even though it's rooted in New England, or not, sorry, it's common in New England. I think it actually started in like the Minnesota region and up into Canada is where the word is from. Don't exactly quote me on that because I'm still. It
sounds Minnesotan. There's strange folks up there.
I think Ojibwe.
Okay.
Might, and somebody visiting from New England thought the word was cool and they brought it back. And there are Wampanoag words for this kind of earth sphere. So here's the words. Let's get down to what the thing. So essentially what a Pukwudgie is a small, possibly malevolent, sometimes benevolent, hard to say. They sort of differentiate sometimes between the two of these like 3 foot tall forest spirits that are like little hairy men.
Little hairy men.
Little hairy beings, bipedal folks who are very good at mimicry. And there are stories as recently, like within the last few years, of people in the Bridgewater Triangle area, which is not far from where I live, pretty much Rhode Island, Massachusetts section, where there's a lot of different phenomena happening there. Of being followed by or being called by these creatures, and the lore is if you follow them, you end up dead in the swamp, type of thing. Though again, there are sometimes helpful stories too. So I find that really fascinating because those kinds of stories show up all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. So that's kind of folklore that's going back at least several hundred years, and probably later than that once you go into the Wampanoag and the other indigenous tribes and groups in the area, because it's a small area. So all of these stories are going to overlap with that. And those tribes were not all peaceful with each other as well, but different side story. So getting back to folklore that I think is important. Hi, I'm neurospicy.
We'll take tangents all you want.
I'm a Gemini. I like to tell you things. So actually right above me, right above my desk, is the silkscreen print of a bridge that's here in Providence. And it's a like a train type of, that kind of not beautifully aesthetic bridge, but it's been stuck up for at least 100 years, if not longer. And they've just left it that way. It's even caught on fire and it's still there. And the words that are underneath that the artist put with this image are, the soul of a place is diminished when you dismantle its strange things.
Mm.
And it's kind of one of the quirky things about Providence and Rhode Island, is we have a lot of weird things that are just, you're like, yep, that's the bridge that's stuck up. But we love that this bridge has failed. It is sort of an icon to a certain time. And then very recently, we had a major failure on one of the bridges that is still used. So they had to shut down the Washington Bridge, which cuts off East Providence, because Rhode Island is situated where you get like one big chunk of the state, and then there's a little another peninsula that comes down.
Mm.
And then Massachusetts. So all of these people kind of got stuck. And people were like, maybe we should try to get the bridge down.
That'd be quite a predicament.
Yeah, it's not stable. But I love the symbolism of something where it, at time it served its use, and then it's sort of taken on a mythology of its own. And that it's not something that's perfect, right? We tend to think of like, in spiritual terms, perfection, the gods, this whole the universe must be perfect. And it's like, here's something decaying and a symbol of different times, and yet we still love it as it's continuing to decay. And if anybody ever tears that down, it will be kind of ripping out the heart of the city.
Mm-hmm.
And in our own magic, to be able to recognize the powers of symbols that are more common around us, that are present in our everyday lives, that are part of the landscape, that take on a different kind of meaning, that it doesn't have to be this big, elevated, shiny gold.
Right.
Sense of perfection. And so I think that's a big part of, that's a big part, as well as the humor of it.
Yeah. No, I've always said, I would say always, it's just been a long time. But one of my favorite things is like, everything is local. It's right here around you. You don't have to go somewhere special in history to experience magic or mystery. It is right where you are. My favorite spot here where I live, there's this corner. It's kind of a busy intersection now of how you get to the local park where the local pool is and all that shit, and and a road that goes through that area. And but at one point, before the town expanded into that territory in the late 1800s, there was the story of this tree they called the lone elm. And this whole area used to be surrounded by a lot of prairie grass. And if you've never seen prairie grass and understand how fucking tall that stuff is, right, you don't understand just how crazy it must have been just to travel through here at times, worried about predators or hiding in the grass. And then, of course, if you're a traveler going west in this period of time, you're going to have some encounters with indigenous folks, right? Mm-hmm. Well, this lone elm became this kind of guidepost of sorts for people to know that you could meet here for trading. The local tribe of the indigenous folks would meet here and trade with you, help you. You could climb the damn thing and look for, something to hunt. There's deer everywhere, and so on and so on and so on. And this tree just it built its own mythic character of sorts for the region. And then sometime in the 50s or 60s, I think, it got sick and they had to cut it down.
Aww.
And they planted another one there, but there's this giant rock sitting there on the corner with this plaque that tells the story of that tree. And nobody thought it was all that important until someone, and I don't know who they are, but I suspect they're a witch of some sort or a pagan of some kind. Mm-hmm. They got on the local historical society and they made sure that tree was like centerpieced, and they named a big like room at the train station where they do band performances and plays and things after that tree. And it just became a bigger part of the local lore. And for me, my practices, I like late night walks when there's not a lot of traffic there, and you can feel something in that area. It just feels like you're being guided, you're being shown the right way. I call it a wayfinder kind of spirit, like it just has that feel and that vibe to it that, if you could tap into something like that, if you feel lost and confused, here's a great kind of example where to go get help. If you literally are just trying to think of a direction to take, here's the sort of thing that you do. If you need to feel safety and comfort, that was another thing this thing provided. It has that vibe to it. Those are all around you, folks. Go find them.
It has that the power of the shrine too, right? That so many generations of people have experienced that tree being there and have walked by it. I always like to always I like to
we have always
I'm kind of lighting you now. I'd like to tell students, especially in either whether I'm teaching Weave the Liminal or Anatomy of a Witch, is that the land remembers everyone and everything that has ever walked, crawled, flown across it. That land has a memory outside of our own understanding of memory. And so it's all of those impressions. It's all of those spirits and ghosts and patterns and rhythms. So it's like it's a tree itself is sort of the antenna of all of that, pulling all of that through. And so that you're communing with all of those people and animals and experiences as well, all at once.
Yeah. If people live in a house, big house, right there on that corner too, I wish they would let me just do rituals in their yard. Knock on the door and be like, my name's Lonnie. I'm a heathen, and I would like to hold rituals in your front yard. I don't know that they'll go over very well in this very, very, very conservative town.
Maybe if you're like, and then we'll do a big barbecue afterwards.
Yes. Sounds like maybe that'll work. Smooth it over that way. You have done quite a lot since you've been on the show last time, and I'm looking over at my bookshelf where you occupy a section of it, a good section of it.
Nice there.
Anatomy of a Witch. Loved it. Fucking loved it. And this is something that Aiden Walker and I got into even on the last episode before this one is coming out. There seems to be a few voices, and I think you're leading among them, talking about embodying your craft, that it is to make it a physical, visceral thing. Why take that approach? Why is it important?
Well, we're here for a reason, right? We're embodied for a reason.
Yeah.
Why not enjoy it? Now, going back to mentioning, those early rituals that I was doing, leading that group in college, it was so much rooted in dance and experiencing the body, and I was just learning, starting to learn folkloric and Middle Eastern and various forms of dance at that time. And even in those early experiences, in those early moments, I felt how powerful it was to experience it through the body instead of worrying about the words being perfect or the altar being perfect. It was if allowing ourselves to move without worrying about a choreography or does this look pretty or any of these things. We let go of those expectations. We share so much more with each other, anybody we're sharing that space with, as well as kind of opening up our spirits to connecting on a larger path with everything else around us. And again, it's like we have so, it was like, oh, the extra special senses. And like taste is an amazing thing. The fact that you can feel things is amazing. That whatever point of sight that we have, whether you can see through your corneas or that you're visioning something inside, I think all of these together, they also bring us so much information that's important. That is also contributing to the sixth sense as well, right? How we're perceiving the world. And if we're using it to observe the world around us, because I always say
I think you're going to be thinking about that now.
I know. Crap. Thanks for ruining always for me, Lonnie.
I did it myself first.
It's good to ruin things. That witchcraft is somewhere between 80 to 90% observation. And it's not just seeing things with your eyes, it's the feeling, it's the perceiving. All of that is observation. So kind of, you have to be present in order to observe. Mm-hmm. And we're like, what about trance? Like, no, that is also still being present in some way. You're still experiencing it through the filter of the body in that connection there. So I think once we look at our body as being our most powerful magical tool, magic becomes so much easier. Crafting ritual becomes so much easier. And our ability to connect with everything and everyone around us to the level that we would like to, it just shifts because our brains are assholes.
Now there's a book that needs written.
Because people are like, well, why is the witch's mind? Why is the weaver like the smallest chapter? I mean, I think it is. I'm not sure.
I can go grab it if you want.
But I feel like when I teach the workshop, it's really our smallest focus out of the 5 parts, right? So we have the witch's heart, the witch's lungs, the serpent, the bones, and then the weaver, the witch's mind. Because I think we are, as a species, as a culture, we are so stuck up in our heads. We're like the Futurama head jars, where we think our brains control everything. And our brains are really more of a mission control. The rest of our body is also thinking and feeling. And so if we allow ourselves to be fully in communication with the whole of our bodies, then the brain isn't the one just in charge. The brain is in communion with the body. And that it just changes. And I think it's better for us emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically to rebalance the brain, rebalance the whole body in that sort of way, where we're not just all stuck up in our heads.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And I mean, for me, reading something like that and thinking about things like that is, like in heathenry, we have our idea of a soul complex, which is, depending on who you want to listen to, a very complicated model of a lot of different parts and following spirits and all kinds of fun stuff, folks. And then in many witchcraft traditions have even something as basic as this concept of like a lower, middle, higher, or something of that kind. We're generally across the board, we all agree that the soul is something more than just one thing. And I don't know about a lot of witchcraft traditions because my primary practice is within heathenry, but the body itself is recognized as a vital part of this whole complex because it is how you are experiencing the world around you. And I think the more people get in tune with that through various exercises, the better. Yeah. And you have, now I don't know, did you call them witchwool or no?
Yeah.
What are they called?
The witchwool workouts.
Okay. I got confused there for a second. It's the witchwool workouts. They're on YouTube, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And what did that come out of your whole Anatomy of a Witch project?
Yes. As it was, I had some of my Patreon folks, my beta readers for that. They're like, oh, if I only had like a video to go along with this, I'm like, well, because it's hard. It's hard to talk about movement in a book, right? I know,
Mm-hmm.
as someone who moves a lot, though, I'm like, what, how do I, what, where? It's so much easier to watch and kind of play with your body that way, so that it's a little bit more immediate. So I decided I would start creating those videos that kind of go along with the book. But it was also a bit of a personal accountability thing, because of where it was in the pandemic. I'm like, I need to move my butt more. And the rest of me too.
Yeah, we all need to do that.
Yeah, and I was like, I still need to get back into that. So I did 150 of those. So there's a lot. And then like the room I was filling in changed, and we were going to do this and that. And so it's been a while. But it's such an important thing. Like I'm like, how do I get back into doing this? Like, in what space do I do it in? And
No.
and then and then my partner caught COVID, so I was like, well, we're just everything's all plans are off. And
Now I can hear the cringing out there right now from the word workout. I can hear the clench. It's going on. You're not telling people to go into some intense, high intensity, do a bunch of jumping jacks and squats and burpees and whatnot. This is not what you're talking about, right?
No. Movement that is accessible for pretty much everyone, regardless of physical ability, size, age, all of those things. It's just tapping into the power of simple movement and connecting it with meaning, and movement and meaning going together. So it can be just breath. It can be simply moving your hands. It can be moving the whole body. And some of them are more vigorous. But I know it's always frustrated me. I've been borderline anemic and, various other things my whole life, just, genetics and things like that. And it used to drive me insane as a dance student that I'd go to a class where the warm-up was almost the bulk of the class. Like, we're doing the jumping jacks, we're doing push-ups, we're doing sit-ups. I'm like, I came to a dance class. I know. And so my level of energy that I would be able to spend and focus on the actual dance has been worn out by 20 to 40 minutes of bullshit.
Yeah.
There's like, no. If I'm going to do those, I'm going to do that at my own time, because that is part of conditioning, right? If I'm going to be whatever kind of dancer, right? There's conditioning has to be done. In my own dance classes, I give a very simple warm-up that people get their bodies moving that feels comfortable for them, and they'll know it by their own, how their bodies feel. And then we get into, how do you connect this to your brain, right? How do you connect it to your spirit? How do you put these things together? And so it does make it so much more accessible, and I think easier to apply to people than go feel the burn.
That's the element fire.
I don't want to get exhausted that you can't do the thing. Like, that just totally defeats the purpose. And exhaustion can be a physical exhaustion, or it can be a mental or emotional exhaustion. So I think it's important. Like, yes, it's we should all be doing things to move our bodies every day, but not in such a way that it feels like punishment.
Right.
Unless you're into that.
And yes. And consent matters, folks.
Yes.
Always travel with your safe words. There's another book that he's written. No. I did have a question from one of my Patreon members that I thought you might like to add or answer. Mm-hmm. So, Kate asked, well, I'll pull it out of the comment here. Said, here's a question. Sometimes with sigils, I feel like I'm doing either too little or too much. Any counsel for finding a comfortable and laid back sigil practice?
I guess it depends on what state they're considering is too little or too much. Mm-hmm. Because are we talking about the drawing process, or are we talking about ritualizing afterwards? Right. Tell us now, Kate. We'll pick it up.
Kate, we need more information. We need more information. Is there? It's like What was the movie? Office Space, minimum amount of flair. Is there a minimum amount of flair that a sigil has to have?
All right. Yeah, so if we take part A, so the actual drawing creation process, the bulk of the work in my method, in the Sigil Witchery method, comes down to the brainstorming, right? To really consider what is it that you want to accomplish and what does that look like? So what are the elements? What are the ingredients that go into that? So, if you say, I want a new job, okay, well, why do you want a new job? Do you need more money? Do you want to have your own office? Are you looking for academic advancement? Are you, what are you looking? You want to be secure, all your bills paid. What does that look like for you? More mental stimulation. Every person's going to be a little bit different. So really outlining those things and then crafting the sigil, right? So if you're just like, I want a job, that's not going to work for my particular method because you're not going to have dwelled. Well, you did dwell deeply upon this concept. So it has the thought. The heavy lifting comes with the thought process. In the drawing process, sometimes you get like a hole in one. Right? For mini golf, right? Sometimes you just hit the ball and you get it in the hole, and you're like, "How the hell did I do that?" Because the next time you go and you're like over par, right? Because it's like, we get the ball in the hole. Drawing is just like that. Sometimes you sit down, you draw it in the first go, and it's perfect. It's like boom, that's right. And then sometimes you're doing like 20 of these things before you get to what's right. And neither of those things are wrong. It just means in that moment you're kind of tapping into, you have a better idea of what it is that you're looking for. And the other process, you're really trying to attune everything. So there's that. Right? So it tends to be either pretty easy or seems like a slog. And both are fine. So you're not cheating if you're like, I got it in hole one. It's not going to work, as is the one that took 20 times. And then when it comes to the ritual part of it, now I often say, with the 4 steps, 1 is figure out what you want to do. Number 2 is brainstorm. Number 3 is design. And number 4 is the optional, which is to apply and or acknowledge your sigil. If you just close your book or your Post-it note or wherever and call it a day, the magic is going to happen, right? Because magic starts with thought. You have created the symbol that really visualizes that, and it has already started to affect you and influence the world around you. But because we are human beings with all of our senses and our touches and our different neurospiciness, we often like to do more things, like draw it on a candle or make some sort of elaborate poster with it, and then burn it, whatever you do. And so that, again, if you feel drawn to do those things, it feels like it just really helps you get into the process more. But if you're like, nope, done, close the book, I'm good, it's still going to work.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay, I agree.
Yeah, it's not, you don't need to tick off, I've worked 6 hours on this, therefore it's going to work. Like, you can get something done in 5 minutes and it will work, or you can do 5 hours of something and it will work.
Mm-hmm. No, and she did write a whole book about it, folks. Two.
Actually, we're actually up to 3 because the Oracle that will be coming out also has its own little booklet.
Nice. Yeah. So Sigil Witchery, that's the first one, and then Visual Alchemy. What was the idea behind Visual Alchemy? What made you want to write like a follow-up in a sense to Sigil Witchery?
So the funny thing is the first book that I ever pitched to Llewellyn was called Visual Alchemy.
Oh.
And it was one of those things at PantheaCon where you do the kind of, not to say speed dating, but speed pitching. And I got Bill, who's the head publisher at Llewellyn, and he's like, yes, there's nothing else like this. Write this book. And I'm like, great, I'll do that. This was 2014, I think. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, I got to go write a book. And then I pretty much psyched myself out because it's like, oh, people want this. What if it's going to be wrong? And then I wrote The Witch's Cauldron because that was sort of a what I call one of my procrastination techniques, in that like, that is a thing I'm feeling totally comfortable with, and it wasn't well on my plan, so therefore I'm going to go work on this. And, that was a fun book. And so like building up the confidence. So the visual alchemy book though still was about the intersection of art and magic. And I think people look at Sigil Witchery, and though the undertone is the intersection of art and magic, people still, every single workshop, and I've taught hundreds of them at this point on Sigil Witchery, is there is always someone who's like, I can't draw, a straight line even with a ruler. I can't, my stick people are horrible. I can't do art. And the thing is that art is part of the human experience. Modern society in the last 200 years has really done a bang up job, and I mean that sarcastically, of, trying to separate art from being integral. They try to be like, this is elitist or it's unnecessary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we want it to be elite, but we also want it to be unnecessary because it's about money, which is not what art is about.
And they're always the first programs that are under attack in schools and stuff too.
Yes,
yep.
Absolutely. I think I have a rant in visual alchemy about that. So to be able to get people to realize that art has helped us evolve as a species, because it helps us with problem solving, because it helps us with visualization, it helps us to express and commune and to share. All of these things are not about being a gallery or museum quality artist. They are about being human. And it was like each of my books, like, what is my agenda? My agenda for visual alchemy is, yes, I want you to refine. Here's ways you refine your sigil making process, because now that you've got this, here's the next level. Here's my design degree in a book for you. Congratulations! I just saved you $100,000.
Nice.
I went on scholarship, and it's been a long time, but. A lot of money these days. And not only that, but to be able to get over those fears and see that art is integral to all aspects of our lives, and how it can enhance all of your ritual processes, not just drawing sigils, but how you create atmosphere. That when you are choosing an incense, and you're choosing perhaps an altar cloth, or what you're wearing that day, or where you're going, you're considering all of these things, and they are part of an artful experience.
I like that.
That's really it. It grew up from that first idea 10 years ago, about getting people excited about intersection art and magic, because they're pretty much the same thing, to, I think, in a more mature voice, being able to get people through that versus just telling them about it, being like, here.
Yeah. Something I've started to wonder more and more, and in a way, you're going to be the first person I ask, I guess. Mm-hmm. Yeah. In the very digital world we live in now, especially with things like TikTok, right? Mm-hmm. What motivates you to keep writing books?
Well, I'm not on TikTok, so that helps. Yeah, people were like, "Why? How are you not?" I'm like, my videos, if you notice, there is no editing. If I have to edit it, nothing would ever get done. And much, I am Lady Wizzywig.
I love it.
But I love words. I love books. As someone who's on the spectrum, like, that was my escape in some ways, as all my sanctity, sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
If I wasn't out in our backyard playing in that little tiny cabin that my grandfather and my father made for me, playing Witch of the Woods, I was either drawing or I was reading, and reading so many books. And like my school always did the MS-a-thon, like how many books you could read to raise money for multiple sclerosis, and things like that. And just like it. transformed my experience of the world, because I realized how many different viewpoints there were, how many different cultures there were, that you can learn so much, not just from taking a class, but to really feel that the empathetic experience that happens when we are being told stories and experiencing stories, because I think stories are vital for empathy. I feel like I'm promoting The Moth right now. It's one of my favorite podcasts. And so I love that form of communication. So whether it's physically written in a book or it's the audio book, because they're both books, right?
Right.
Is that is a way of sharing and communing with people in a way that is a conversation. Because I feel like our desire for very short, tiny things can peak a conversation. But it's very, very rarely the whole of it, right? It's just a little tiny tidbit. And a book allows us for that deeper, long form experience. And it also connects in our brains in a different way than just a short video.
Yeah. Are you the narrator on your audiobooks?
No.
No.
Funny story. So, first book was The Witch's Cauldron, and then Sigil Witchery came out, and then The Witch's Altar, and then Weave the Liminal. They're all kind of in a jumble in there. So I could be slightly off on those dates. But none of the Witch's Tool series were audiobooks, right? And I wouldn't expect them to make an audiobook of Sigil Witchery. Spoiler alert, they have now. Because it's such a visual book. And so I wasn't expecting the audio rights for Weave the Liminal to be sold.
Oh.
Or at least be picked up so quickly. And so I hadn't any idea at that point in my writing career what that process was. And so in March, so this is, the book came out in January. In March, someone was asking about the audiobook, and I was like, oh, well, Nathan and I are going to record it, because, Nathan is a sound guy. And they're like, well, it says on Amazon it's coming out at the end of this month. And I'm like, what? And that's how I found out that the audio rights had been bought, and that Tantor Media was recording it. And that had nothing to do with that narrator.
Interesting.
Which then inspired my future contracts for me to have any sort of approval over who was, I had to be able to approve who was reading the book.
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah. And actually for my next project, I'm retaining the audio rights for various reasons.
Nice. I think that's probably a wise decision.
Yeah.
Even if you don't plan to be the voice yourself, at least you would have some say over how that gets done. I think that's a great idea. One more thing I wanted to get into before we end this regular portion was you have been one of the leading voices, I think, on social media, especially about AI in art, especially as it appears in tarot and oracle decks.
Why have I been that loud?
Now, for folks that don't know, there is, and I've seen it. I am in love with Kickstarter. I've been a Kickstarter obsessed tarot junkie for more years than my wallet likes. But I have seen in the last year more and more and more of the AI art showing up.
Yeah.
And for me, it's pretty obvious when you see it, and I don't like it. I don't like it because aesthetically it just doesn't appeal to me. Mm-hmm. You have deeper beef with this. What is it? If you want to get into it.
Oh gosh. So when it comes to tarot, there's part of my brain that just goes, it's lazy. I know somebody will have beef with that too. But as an artist, who creates with traditional media, mostly traditional media, so like the Anatomy of Witch Oracle, those were all ink and watercolor paintings that were done on white watercolor paper. and I did scan them in and then created a parchment background, which I created multiple variations of parchment backgrounds. So none of them are exactly alike.
Yeah.
for 48 cards, because I'm that kind of nut. Instead of being like one background to fill them all.
That's right.
So I don't have a problem with digital manipulation of work, right? Because I'm still the one controlling the digital manipulation of it. But the whole thing of coming up with the idea of the art and truly having your hand involved in it, which is not just my hand, it's going to be my brain. And the decisions that are made in the drawing process are incredibly vital and absolutely magical. There are things like I love watching videos of people. Sounds tough. I love watching people like look at the Oracle decks and look at my decks and see something in that I didn't even see. In the thing. Like I can look at my art and see different common things, but people are like, and then the spiral does this thing which symbolizes that, and I'm like, oh, it totally can.
Yeah.
And if I break it down at a subliminal and subconscious level, it's like it's really incredible and amazing what's happening there. And that's all being filtered through my experiences and my aesthetic and what I'm trying to communicate to the person reading the cards, right? And when you take that out and you just tell a computer a bunch of prompts, which people are probably like, no, fuck you. You are missing the magical work that actually happens in the human experience, which is why we are human beings having an embodied experience, right? Mm-hmm. The work, like, now, every time I think about drawing a dragon or a mermaid, and like, ooh, all of those scales, and you're so excited to draw all those scales, and then like 50 scales in, you're like, fuck this shit.
This sucks.
Right? My hand's tired. But part of you is so excited about that. Like, I understand wanting to go past that. And there are people who say it's about accessibility. Like, it's about practice. This is all about practice. So there's that end of the AI experience that I think is robbing people for the most part, or is lazy, or is not really creating something that is a full conversation. The other thing, which probably more for lately, is the people sharing these graphics. So, we just had Yule here in the Northern Hemisphere. And so my feed has been these ridiculous images of, the Holly King and the Oak King and various variations with like 16 fingers each, and all of this weird shit that's not connected. And people are like, look at this beautiful image. I'm like, this is not a beautiful, this is AI. There's so many things wrong with this image. And part of it is it's not just coming down to stealing jobs from artists, right? It's coming down to people aren't paying attention. People aren't observing and looking and really considering. It's come down to, oh, that looks fine, I'm just going to share it. It's like, no, we need to slow down. We need to consider, where is the art coming from? Because it's still important if you're sharing a live or dead artist, or liminal artist. Schrodinger's artist is neither alive nor dead in the box. In the box of the internet, the ghost in the machine. Still giving that credit, right? So that we are crediting the work where it's coming from, whether this is art, whether it's music, whether it's a piece of writing, that we're doing that so other people can learn, and that we are also really connecting with that image or that piece of work, and not just sharing it because it just caught your eye in a moment. Like, share with us a piece of who you are and why this is important to you. And I think as a society, the more on the surface we are, the more we're missing the lived experience, and the more we are not only hurting other people and creators, we're hurting ourselves.
Yeah. And in that, you mentioned like robbing, right? And that's something that I never occurred to me. I mean, I just knew that I would look at these things. I'd look at the hands, usually were the big signal that something's not right here. And it never occurred to me, I guess, that the art was being taken and meshed together in some new form, but taken from somewhere else. and largely without consent. I believe there are currently like lawsuits or something going on with Chat GPT and a lot of those bigger companies. And they are under some serious attack right now from very powerful legal forces.
Good.
Yeah. I just saw that yesterday.
Good. I hope it hits Amazon too, because there's so many AI books that have been like there are at least 8 sigil books that you can tell were fed Sigil Witchery. They're not by actual authors.
Do you get, as an author, I mean, I don't know what all the publishers can and can't do in that front, but when you spot something, or like, is there a department of Llewellyn that's scraping the internet to find that stuff?
There is a legal team, though I don't know how big the team is. And keeping in mind, people think that Llewellyn is huge, and
they're not.
Yeah, like the jewelry company I worked for was far more massive than Llewellyn. It's like more people in the warehouse than that. It's a fairly small thing, but I have a contact for when I see stolen PDFs for sale on Etsy, which I think they've managed to crack down on. It's been a while. Watch that one more tomorrow. And I do try. I don't believe Amazon does much of anything, at least for hearing individual voices, because I report things, and it's
nothing
like
happens.
Screaming into the void with that. But I think with enough, like Simon and Schuster, if all, these other bigger publishers are getting into a lawsuit, it could finally change the landscape. Because there's like, there's the Mary Silva books, and now there's another one that's sort of like has a riff on her name, her with the quotes, because Mary Silva is not a real person. It's like, here's a whole bunch of AI covers, and the same topics are basically a rehash of the AI books. Like what kind of garbage, that we're getting down the line here. That's
a bunch of mashed up copyright infringement, basically, is what it sounds like.
And it's not properly written stuff. It's not, you're just getting stuff that's being put in a blender. So you don't have, trustworthy information, like we already know that the baseline for authors is like, is this a trustworthy person? Do they know what they're talking about? You're going to take that sort of, could be really good, could be dodgy. And now we're just going deep into the dodgy, so far down. And like,
I can only imagine how frustrating it is. I found one instance, and if I found one, that means there's got to be more that I don't know about. But one instance, people taking content of my show and mashing it up and presenting it as theirs. And that was very frustrating. I sent them a very stern cease and desist letter with the help of one of the lawyers at work, and that site disappeared. I also got a shit ton of malware attacks a month after that. So I don't know. I don't know. It sucks that you all have to contend with that kind of thing. I think it's awesome that you're raising awareness about it. I do understand that there are people out there who feel that they are artists too. The one thing that all that seemed to do was open up a creative platform to people who formerly couldn't create the deck or something that they were looking to make. I don't know how I feel about that, because of the fact that I don't know where that art actually comes from now. And that was never in my awareness before. And it is now. And that's thanks to you. And Sasha Graham has raised a lot of alarm bells about it too. So, I mean, just thank you. Thank you for raising awareness for that. And I know I learned more about the problem with it because of you, and I'm hoping that others do too.
Well, thank you for hearing, and thank you for sharing the awareness, because I think that's really what it takes, is that there's more people need to know that art has to come from somewhere.
It does.
And that there are these things going on, and that there are the fake decks and all of that stuff is it's like, we might be tired about hearing about it, but there's always going to be somebody who doesn't know. And all the best that we can do is help educate each other. so that we can be stronger as a community and support our community, because it's those little things that make a big difference.
Yep, absolutely agree. All right. Well, I think we're coming to the end of the regular portion of the show. Is there anything that I didn't bring up, something you want to talk about, anything you want to get into before we move on to Patreon?
Is there anybody else I can piss off?
Anybody else? Next.
Oh, I am excited for, hopefully this year is going to, 2024 is going to bring some exciting new things. And we've got a bunch of events, so I'll be at Paganicon and Sacred Space and a Metaphysical Marketplace in Massachusetts, and I'm planning to be at Mystic South and probably a few other things going on. I'm trying not to overschedule myself because I also have 2 books to write this year.
2? My goodness.
I got very excited and I proposed them both, and the publisher said yes, and I'm like, oh great. So
of course they said yes. They're like, yeah, yes we will. Yeah.
I'm so excited, but I'm really excited. Sigil Witchery did the Oracle. I can't wait for it to come out because I think that's going to change people's appreciation of art and how they look at art and how they use it in their practice, not just for crafting sigils, but how they can see shapes and symbols in their lives and their practice, and all of that. And so I'm like, that's yay.
That sounds very exciting. I'm very looking forward to it. I mean, I evangelize your Sigil Witchery book. I tell people all the time, I'm like, Tempest rewrote the book on sigils, and that's the only one you need. And this is coming from someone who came from that chaos magic world, right? Like, I'm just saying, you rewrote the way to do it, and I could not love it more.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Well, where can people find you and all the wonderful things you offer?
Well, definitely not TikTok. I have my website, which is lauratempestzakroff.com, which hopefully soon is going to get a whole new facelift. Yay!
Well, that'll be fun.
And probably the best place to go is on Instagram. And that's where you find alchemy.arts, and that's OWLKEYME.arts. And that will also get you to my link tree, which shows you my Patreon and my YouTube channel and all the other links of the links of the links.
The links of the links of the links. That is right. All right, cool. Everyone, please do go check it out. And please do check out Laura's books because they're important. I'm not playing here, folks. They really are excellent and important. So if you want to hear the rest of this conversation, and again, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you all for listening. If you want to hear the rest of this conversation, you need to go to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership, or you can go to patreon.com/weirdwebradio. That's how you get it, and that's how you get access, folks. All right. Thank you, as always, for listening. Please share your episodes that you love the most with all the people that you like, and even those you may not. It's fine. And come join us for the rest of the conversation. Stay weird out there, my friends. And now it is bonus audio time.
Bonus time.
Laura Tempest Zakroff, are you ready?
Yes.
She's not ready.
No, maybe. Green, blue.
Yeah. Yeah. It has been a hot minute since you've been here. So typically the first question I ask is, what famous person's resting place would you most like to visit? I'm curious. What are you going to say now?
Wait, what did I say last
time? What do you think you said last time?
Do you want to hear how they just answered that question? What famous person's resting place would you most like to visit? That and many others, including what they think about the afterlife, what they may or may not do in cemeteries, what are their traditions and magical practices that have to do with the dead, folklore that surrounds their homes, and so much more, available for only $5. $5 a month. Even if I make more than one episode in a month, it's still just $5 a month at patreon.com/weirdwebradio, or go to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership. You can find me on Instagram at weirdwebradio. You can find me on Facebook as Weird Web Radio, or come join the new, fun, and exciting Weird Web Radio Facebook group. Thank you again for being here. Stay weird out there, my friends.